Hi, and welcome to Unfiltered Solopreneur, the podcast where we share real, unvarnished stories of people who dared to break free from the corporate grind. I'm your host, Nikhil, and I'm passionate about helping solopreneurs like you turn their dreams into reality. What happens when a resume writer becomes part therapist, part editor, and part confidence coach? In this episode, Hallie Belt shares how getting laid off more than once became the catalyst for launching a business that helps people own their career story. We talk about Google blacklists, the quiet trauma of job loss, and why a resume isn't just a document, it's a transformation. If you're struggling to articulate your value or help others step into theirs, this one's for you. See you on the other side with my reflections. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil Vaish, your host, founder and CEO of Boost Solo. My next guest is a word-slinging, music-loving, resume revamping force who transforms careers by day while quietly dreaming of merging her editing chops with her lifelong passion for music. Hallie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So let me jump right in, right? You've had a pretty rich career in editing, teaching, working the agency side. What was the pivotal moment or final straw, if you like, that made you say, okay, I'm going to bet myself and I'm going to launch my, belt styles?
I think it was the time I got laid off again. I think it was maybe the third or fourth time I got laid off from an ad agency. And I decided that other people could use my help. And I had gone to an outplacement agency and learned how to increase my resume writing skills. I had already been doing some resumes for friends, but I learned how to make them better or make my skills better. And I decided to start a business after that because I thought it was a great way to help people and merge my writing and editing and interest in helping people skills.
Okay. And so it sounds like you had a side hustle while you were still working. You were just helping people. You hadn't thought of turning that into a business. You were just doing that sort of to help friends because you were good
Well,
at
I
it.
helped a few friends. I didn't help a
Okay.
lot of friends. I helped a few
Yeah.
friends, but I did turn it into a business in around a few years later in 2013, more formally to a business. And I felt that people didn't know how to articulate who they are professionally. So I felt that I could help them do that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And in fact, I tell most people that it's good to actually have any sort of side hustle that you sort of build slowly, because I think that also gives you a little bit of confidence when you
Mhm.
launch. So you're not just randomly saying, "Let me go and figure out how to make jeans or whatever." Try to figure out what you're going to do next.
Right.
Yeah. So obviously, getting laid off is always a horrible experience. But can you tell us a little bit about how that shaped your perspective on job security and solopreneurship? And sort of being on your own?
Well, how getting laid off shaped my.
Yeah, the perspective on those things.
Oh, well, I understood really well what it was like to get laid off because I've been laid off a few times, as had other people in the company.
Right.
Um, and I felt that I could sympathize with my clients more because some of them had been laid off or else they were making a career transition, but I knew exactly what they were going through, having been there myself. So I felt that I was a sympathetic person for that.
Yeah, having experienced it yourself. And I'm going to come back and talk about that. There was something interesting you mentioned about that. So what was your idea of a solo business when you first started, and how did it turn out to be different
Um, Different from what?
in terms of what you thought it was going to be like? Did you
Oh,
have a
okay.
picture in your mind, or?
Right. I didn't know that it would be so much work as far as getting it up and running. I had a resume. I had a website for resumes, and that worked for a while, but it wasn't professional looking enough. And having been an editor for, at that point, 15 years in the advertising world, I felt that I needed to get a better website and um, make sure I was advertising on maybe places like Google and Yelp. And um, I think what I didn't know is that I didn't really need to pay for advertising. I paid a fair amount of money for advertising on Yelp, and I guess it was in Google Ads, and I didn't think that that was important afterwards because I really wasn't getting much business from that. I was getting business from word of mouth and through the Google reviews that I have or the Yelp reviews. So I would immediately ask somebody after they had a good experience with me or an experience with me to write a review for me and only, just write a couple lines about how they felt about the experience. And they were almost all positive, very positive reviews. So that was good. So people like to, I think, read those reviews before they decide to give you a call or give me a call.
Yeah, no, you're right. That is actually marketing gold. I always tell people like testimonials from real customers is
Right,
worth more than any advertising budget or anything you or I could say about ourselves, right? Because
right,
it's proof that you do what you say you do, and somebody has experienced the value from your service.
right.
Um, yeah, and so let me ask you now in terms of branding. You talked about branding, but so you've been recognized as a top resume writer in Chicago. But you mentioned to me when in our pre-call that your leads sort of dropped off after your website got hacked. So can you talk to us a little bit about how that affected your brand visibility and also maybe your confidence?
I think that Google, I didn't know what was happening because I would get a few calls a week at least,
Yeah,
sometimes a couple calls a day, and nothing was happening. And um, apparently someone told, I guess one of my customers or one of my clients told me that she went to my website and a strange robot came up. And so I went to the website. I don't look at my website very often. So I went to my website and looked at it, and and I figured I'd been hacked. So I ended up getting professional help for the site and got that cleared up. But in the meantime, um, I think Google blacklists those people that or those websites. So that I assume my website was blacklisted or pushed to the bottom or something. I don't know. It wasn't at the top anymore, it seems. And um, then people couldn't see me. They couldn't
right.
find me if they typed in top 10 resume writers in Chicago or in Illinois. And I was supposedly the top 10, one of the top 10 resume writers for the past 7 or 8 years on Find My Profession and some other platforms. But I couldn't figure out what was going on, but that's what was going on. So then I had to get Google my business verified, and so I had to call Google, but they're hard to reach. So I ended up getting some outside help, which I'm not sure. I ended up figuring it out myself. One thing I've had to do is figure a lot of things out myself.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, when other people don't have the answers.
no,
So
and that is the solopreneur way, right? You kind of have to wear a lot of different hats from tech to accounting to sales, everything.
exactly.
And get acquainted with it. But so one of the other things in my small business community people have been talking about is
Mhm.
Google has also been culling reviews. Has that affected you?
They've been doing they've I lost some of my reviews because I had to delete another Google My Business site.
Yeah.
My previous site that had a lot of positive reviews. It probably had 40 or so really positive reviews. And I ended up, because it was giving me so much trouble, I had to create a new site on Google My Business. I'm probably
Wow.
not saying the right technical terms here, but anyway, so then I had to just get in touch with my former clients and ask them to write me another review. And a lot of them cooperated. So I was happy about that.
That's good. But that's sort of so, I mean, that is pretty, that's debilitates your business, right? Because as solopreneurs, we
Yes.
rely on things like that. So, what could you talk a little bit about sort of the impact? Did it impact your confidence? I mean, what was sort of the emotional impact of that?
Well, I think it's partly that and maybe a little bit of AI and Chat GPT, these helpers that are helping people with their and other resume sites that are
Yeah.
helping people with their resumes. I think that personal touch is helpful. I mean, you can use those. I've used those tools and they are helpful in a way, but they also don't say exactly what I want to say. And it's
Yeah.
important when I talk to my clients and I collaborate and cooperate with my clients that I get from them exactly what they want to say. I pull it out of them.
Right.
So I think there's been some of that too, but um, I'm trying to make that change. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, we all are. We all have to adapt, right? So you talked a
right.
little bit earlier about Google Ads, and I think some of the money you spend not being of much value. So if you could fix, so if you had a magic wand and you could fix one thing about current marketing, what would you fix?
I would love to just target all the people who need help with their resume, all the people who have been laid off and people that have um, are now open to work on LinkedIn. And I know there's Sales Navigator, and I need to explore that. And people are still contacting me, but I think that just I will have to spend some money, but not as much as I had to spend several years ago. Um, and I think that maybe getting a social media manager to help me with that
Yeah.
is would be great because I can't do it all, everything myself.
No,
I
none of us
just want to
can.
help people and concentrate on my clients instead of concentrating on trying to get the clients.
Right. So tell me, in your journey so far, what's been the most difficult aspect of differentiating yourself in the market?
This difficult aspect. Oh, well, I think I don't know if it's been difficult because I think the way I differentiate myself in the market is that I collaborate with my clients the whole way through instead of just take somebody's resume and work on it and then give it back to them. I think what differentiating factor is, well, several are that I have a master's and a bachelor's in English, and
Hmm.
I'm a lecturer in English composition, so I teach a lot of people how to write. And I am an ad agency editor and also have my own resume writing business. So I think I come, and also I lived abroad and taught English abroad. So I have helped all different kinds of people at all educational levels. So I feel that that's my differentiating factor, and I don't think that that's been hard to convey to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, you have a set of skills that not perhaps a lot of resume writers can claim, right? So there is a point of
Right.
difference there. So tell me, what's a big misconception perhaps that people have about resume writing that you've had to overcome in terms of running your business?
That they think that they can do their resume themselves. And some people can, I guess, but
Yeah.
it's hard for me to do my own resume. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to write and to write well. And writing well is sometimes hard. And I think that a lot of people have a trouble talking about themselves, and actually putting it down on paper is difficult. So I think that's what I help them do. And I think if they think they can do their own resume, more power to them. But I think it's a very difficult task to do your own resume.
Yeah, it is very hard because you sort of, it's sort of separating the stuff that is of value to other people versus what you think is valuable. Now, actually, that leads me to a question. You mentioned something interesting to me, which is that your client, it sometimes feels like therapy when you're working with your clients, right? Because you're
Exactly.
sort of processing some of the emotions they're going through as having been laid off. So could you talk a little bit about that aspect of your work and how it sort of shaped your relationships, and maybe how it's a differentiator a little bit?
Well, I talk to people sometimes, and I've had some clients on the initial call crying to me, and
Wow.
I say that it's okay. I understand. I know what you're going through. Um, I think that they feel um, overwhelmed by all that they have to do and by the process, and some of them aren't patient enough to actually go through the process. And I tell them it's like writing a paper, and I'm here with you the whole time. We're gonna have 5 drafts of the resume. It's typically that long, and they just need to kind of trust me with the process, and things like that. And I just have to talk them through. Um, but most people have been just delightful to work with, and I feel very fortunate that a lot of people have gotten jobs pretty quickly after working with me. I checked one guy's LinkedIn. This is a client from years ago, and he had the same information on his LinkedIn page. And his wife was also my client. And I talked to her about it. I said, does he still have the same job? I mean, we worked with him years ago. She goes, oh, no, he just never updated his LinkedIn page. I was like, she goes, he got a job right away.
Wow. That's that's great. And but presumably you have to go there are layers, right? Because what people have on the resume is very surface level often. I always say people hide behind resumes, right? So
Right,
I'm sure, can you talk a little bit about your process? Because I'm sure you said there are 5 drafts, which surprised me.
right,
Yeah.
right. So what they do is they'll send me a couple job descriptions that interest them and descriptions. I've had a couple people actually send me a definition of perhaps like an accountant. But I need the actual description with the requirements and the qualifications, maybe from LinkedIn or Monster. And I give them all that information. I give them maybe 8 to 10 sites to look at. And they send me the resume and I revise it and reformat it and make it applicant tracking system and search engine optimization friendly. And then I go through the resume and make sure about the wording and make sure it's in resume speak, trying to avoid using the an and the articles
Right.
in English language. And I reformat it, and then I give them very easy homework based on the job descriptions,
Hmm.
and then they answer the homework with Y or N for yes or no, and I work with them in the next session or the first session where I'm chatting with them to go through the resume and put in sections from the job description, put that in the appropriate place in the resume. Of course, rewriting everything and
Yeah.
talking to them about every line of the resume. So I try to make all the information results oriented and use the keywords and all of that. So that takes a while. Sometimes they have far too many bullets
Right.
and far too much information. And they sometimes have a tendency to keep talking about what they've done in their jobs when we're chatting, but sometimes I have to cut them off because we'll never get through the 3 hours of chat that we need to have. It'll go overtime, and I don't want to do that. So we go through the resume in an hour, hour and a half, whatever they have time for, and then we'll have another session for another hour and maybe a final session for maybe an hour. It's usually about a 3 hour process of talking with each other. And then we both will look at the resume and they'll add any more information that they want to add, numbers, any percentages, dollar figures, anything like that. And the important thing is that we collaborate with each other on it.
Right. Right. And it's interesting to me because it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are 2 parts, right? The optimization and the ATS friendliness is one, but you've also got to peel back the layers and sort of connect the dots between the right experience to match that role, right? So there's
Right.
a layer of really understanding. And like you said, even I've noticed people tend to put more rather than less in a resume. It's almost like they throw a little bit of the kitchen sink, right? So I'm sure
Right.
part of your job is sort of cutting back and just getting to the nuggets, if you like.
Exactly. And they tend to say proven track record or
Yes.
team player or all those words that don't mean that much. And then just
Transformation.
give me the active voice verb and tell me what you did. What was your benefit? What was the benefit to the company? What was your achievement? So that's what I'm looking for, and to tell how they achieved that, whatever the goal was. So that's what I'm there for, to kind of to coach them and tutor them and get that information from them.
Yeah. So help me, tell me, if it sounds almost to me like, if, I'm thinking about this process the way you described it, you almost, do they walk away with more confidence too when they leave?
Yes.
Because, yeah, because that's, those 2 things are linked, right? If you
Yeah,
feel like you have a stronger, yeah,
I've had a few people look at their resume after we finish and say, "Wow, I've done a lot," or they feel better about themselves, and I think that that's really important. That they feel better, and I said having this down on paper will help it'll equip you in a job interview. You'll be able to articulate what you want to say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally see that because I mean, it's like, you think of it as a piece of paper, but it's actually your life. It's work that sits on
Right,
that, right?
right,
And to actually go through it and then look back at, I guess when you start with whatever, 3 or 4 pages and you end up with one, these days
right,
it's, advisable not to have too many pages, I believe,
right.
because of the
I talked
ageism.
I talked with it was actually a police officer, and he had about 8 or 10 pages, and it was all really
Wow.
unformatted and all. And I thought, if he contacted me on Yelp, and I felt like, is he putting me on? Is he he wanted to talk to me after we talked on the phone. He wanted to talk again in a few minutes, but he was going to eat his lunch, and he told me when he'd call, and he never did. And so it was kind of like I called him back, and we ended up. I said, "Well, let's just get together." And we got together and we knocked it out, and we got it down to 2 pages, and it was great. And I actually don't know, he was looking for a promotion, like I don't know if he got the position, but his resume was quite impressive, and he was quite impressive. But his resume initially wasn't impressive. It didn't look like anything.
Yeah.
So that it's really important that these intelligent, articulate people get represented well on paper.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, and that's very true, right? Because you have a tendency, it almost becomes a repository of your professional life rather than the highlights, right? Which is what people are looking for. Um,
Right.
yeah. And tell me, how do you deal with the ageism thing? Because that, I'm sure you've come across it, right? That's an issue in the corporate world today. And ATS sort of spits out things that feel like, that are expensive. If you look at age, that's the way corporations view it.
Right. Well, I take only the past 15 years, use
Yeah.
only the past 15 years. And then and in fact, I just was in a seminar just before our talk. And I feel like I feel as if I'm doing everything correctly, pretty much the, in my approach to resume writing. But they actually said, or the person who was speaking said, just to use the past 10 years. And I thought, wow, I've never heard that. Just 10 years instead of 15 now. So I guess that makes it easier to put on one page if that's what you want. But the ageism, I'd say the 10 years, take off your education when you graduated from college,
Yeah.
the years. Just put the last part of the resume as, relevant or previous experience, and highlight 1 or 2 things you did at each of those positions if
Yeah.
they're great companies that you worked for. That was what recommended in this particular session, but that's what I would do.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense to me. It's a shame we have to do that, but
I
it is the
know
world we live in. Yeah.
it is,
And
unfortunately. And I try to give them a boost of confidence, like you have a great experience. Just concentrate on that. And
yeah,
one woman who I just remembered this, one woman several years ago, she was really worried about the age thing, and she got a job pretty quickly in her field. So I was really happy to hear about that.
that's great. And so how do you keep tabs with, because these things are changing like every month and now maybe every week with AI and all the other tools that companies are using. So how do you stay abreast? You mentioned a webinar or something you attended a few minutes
Yes,
ago.
that's a very good question. I was just thinking about that before our call. I actually joined a career center for a few months and learned the latest on, tips of the trade. And I sometimes attend these various seminars or webinars to listen to important advice about keeping up with resume writing. And um, I just try to also find out what some of I use Chat GPT sometimes,
Hmm.
and AI, and also other resume platforms. They were talking about in this seminar just before our call. And Actually haven't used those platforms, but I've used ChatGPT and AI and some others, but they mentioned about 5 or 6, so I'll have to check them out. But I try to keep up with all of that while being true to myself and thinking that I can really help people with the personal touch and the
Yeah.
collaboration, which I think is really important.
I was going to ask you, so do you find, are you having clients sort of come to you after GPT fatigue? Because I'm sure most people now go first to GPT and think it'll give them the perfect resume, and then they're disappointed. And like you said, it can't do what you just described to me. And ultimately, there's a judgment, there's a level of judgment too, right, in terms of what you put on the paper and what you don't. So do you feel like you're competing a little bit with the GPT, or are clients coming to you
Yeah,
frustrated? Tell me a little bit about that.
right. And also as a composition instructor, I was competing with ChatGPT, and I could tell. Thought, this is not your writing, but you can't really accuse them. I
No.
know this is not your writing. Um, uh, I haven't really gotten many people saying that.
No.
They've, I've actually put the resume through ChatGPT or some kind of AI. I think it was some sort of ChatGPT um, analysis or something. I can't remember what it was called, but it I was pretty well aligned with what ChatGPT said on their resume. So what I'm doing is working. Fortunately, I'm glad I'm doing it the right way. But I haven't heard very many people complain. Some people just need. I worked with somebody recently who was going through um, a messy time in her life, and she just never had a resume or hadn't had a resume in 20 years. And I get some of those people who have never had a resume for 20 years, and they've always just gone from job to job, or they got it through their husband or their friend or whatever. And that suddenly they need a resume.
Yeah.
And so I help them, those people too. There are a lot of
Yeah.
those people.
Yeah. And is the process any different for that? Because it's like, oh, you're starting from scratch there, right? You don't even have a foundation to build on.
Yeah.
Is it easier
Um,
or is it harder?
I don't think it's
Mm,
either. Well, it's hard when people have a lot,
a
like
lot,
too
right?
much. Some of them, I just said we're
Cutting,
going to use 4 to 6 bullets for each job.
right?
That's all. I don't even know. People look at your resume for a few seconds, so we not need to make sure that we don't give them too much information. Most of that has worked out really well. I mean, they just give me a few things that they've done.
Okay.
Mhm,
So I
mhm.
want to go back to the other thing you mentioned a few minutes ago about how it is hard for people to sort of articulate their value, right? So as someone who works with words, how easy or hard do you find it to write about yourself to sort of promote your brand in a way that feels authentic to you?
I find that easy for
Yeah.
me to promote myself. I don't do it a lot, and I need to do it more. That's why I want to hire somebody else to do it. But I can definitely promote myself, and I don't have a problem doing that. I'm not a bragger, but I don't have a problem writing down my credentials and telling people what I've done. Um, I think other people have a hard time with, not everybody, but some people will talk all day about what they've done on the resume, and I have to, like I said, cut it short and just tell me. Sometimes I'm just asking them a question about a little thing like the grammar, and they tell me, like, they give me a laundry list of all the things they've done. I said, no, I'm just concentrating on this grammar here about the way to word the sentence. so so um, I I just I think one of the things that people should do is think about how they're unique. What sets them apart from other candidates?
Right.
And as I told you, I think I look at the English language from a kind of global perspective, or from a different kind of perspective, because of my experience having lived abroad and taught abroad in three uh, foreign countries, as well as in the United States, and at the high school level, the university level, the graduate level, also at Roosevelt University. Um, and even little kids. I taught at a bilingual elementary school in Madrid, Spain.
Wow.
So I don't have a problem talking about all that and articulating what I do. It's just that I think that like as I said, I think it's important for other people to think about how they're different and put that at the top of their resume.
Right. Yeah,
Mhm.
and how do you? I'm just curious now in terms of the summary line. Do you encourage that? Is there value in that? The 2 line summary that people suggest putting.
So again, I've heard a few different things about this, and
Yeah.
um, some of them from hiring managers and recruiters and all these people that do this for a living. They say just to put bullet points at the top, or even just start. I just heard in the seminar today to start with your skills, but I just wouldn't do that. I would have maybe a 2 or 3 line summary, maybe a bolded line about who you are professionally, so people can know, what your area of expertise is, and maybe list 3 things, 3 areas you're good at, or 3 areas you have experience in. 3 is usually the magic number in writing. You have to have 3 points to make when you write a paper, um, to support your argument.
Right.
So I would have maybe a few lines of a summary and not fluff, and then have the skills at the top. And you can put them in columns, but don't use the column feature. I would just tab over, because that's not good for the applicant tracking system. And then start with your, if your education is relevant for the position, the education could come at the top. Typically, I put it at the end, and then start with your professional experience, and just 4 to 6 bullets about what you did and what the result was. Typically, the result should come for me, the result comes in the beginning of the line.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's a good pointer. And I guess now we're ending up doing a little master class on resume writing. And
Right,
normally
right.
we talk to solopreneurs, but this is maybe people going to the corporate world, but that's okay. But I'm going to continue because I think it's interesting. And so do you recommend writing a different resume for each job you apply to? Like what percentage should you change? That's another thing I've sort of never been clear on.
I'm not clear on it either, because people give me different guidance on it. Again, I just heard today someone who was speaking at this seminar is one of the speakers. She said she has 50 different resumes. That
Wow.
sounds like a lot of work to me.
Yes, that does.
Maybe 2 or 3 if you have 2 or 3 different areas, but I try to keep it as simple as possible. Have that resume and maybe change the skills according to the skills that are in the job description, or
Yeah.
make sure they're on your LinkedIn page too. Um, and maybe change the summary at the top, or the profile, whatever you like to call it, a little bit to tailor it to the job description. But I would just make sure it's just nice to have a resume that has all the different information. I would tailor the skills according to what's in the job description, so that the hiring manager is looking at the resume and knows that you have those skills and they're not somewhere else down the list. But
Right.
and also put them into your professional experience.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes
Mhm.
a lot of sense. And what's your view on the cover letter? And then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about the solopreneur journey. That's another one I've sort of heard. Yes, no, yes, no, no, yes.
That's another thing. They said we don't require a cover letter. I don't always send a cover letter if I apply for a job, and sometimes people contact me because somebody got in touch, somebody that I know, maybe distantly on LinkedIn, recommended me because we worked at the same ad agency. That happened just recently. So I worked for a company in LA while I was in London and Paris this past holiday in December and January, and I was able to work for an LA ad agency while I was there. And um, of course, I didn't need anything. I mean, she didn't even ask for my resume. But I recommend writing a cover letter that's interesting, that gets their attention, about something that you've done, and show the skills that you've incorporated, instead of saying, "Dear so and so, I am applying for this position," and all the or all the cover letters they've already read before. They're all the same. and you might as well grab their interest by doing something different.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. So
Yeah.
I want
So
to,
I help with that too.
yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah, of course. You help with the cover
And
letter.
LinkedIn pages. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. All it's sort of a package these days, right? People look at all
Yes.
three. So you have now you have a background in music, you have a passion for that. You also mentioned wanting to start a podcast to me. So how do you approach adding new services or ventures to your business without sort of diluting your brand focus?
Right. I talked to a recording studio artist one time, and he said that another musician called it slashing. I'm this slash and this slash and this slash, and I've always remembered that. So I try to keep it. I'm not sure how to do that.
Right.
That's where my company originated. It's Belt Styles. It's like different areas that I'm interested in or different things that I do, like music. I also have done voiceover and, teach and have a resume writing business and all this. So I have tried to, uh, I try to keep it to 2 or 3 things, on LinkedIn at least, and not look like I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
Uh, I try to keep those separate.
right. Okay.
Yeah,
Or maybe there are ways to bring them together, right? Because they may be sort of, if you
there
do the
are.
Venn diagram, then those skill sets might actually result in something, powerful for your focus.
Exactly. Yes, I would love to be in the music world, doing some of these things like collaborating with artists or, being in the recording studio. I've done some of that and helping artists with a with their singing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So the other thing we touched on when we chatted was the roller coaster of solopreneur life, right? So was there a moment when you felt like a true low point, and what did you take away from it?
When my
Website
website
was
got
hacked. Okay. But other than that, on your journey, has there been any time when you're like, I want to go back and get a job, or thought about like going back to the corporate world?
well, I've been in and out of the corporate world. I've been in it for the past 23 years or something like that in advertising.
Right.
And for me, advertising was like continuing to return to a bad boyfriend, just keeps treating you the same way. They pay you well, it's pleasant experience and everything, but then they, let you go. I mean, they don't treat you that well in that part. So um, I just, I have been doing both things. Yeah, I've been um, editing for ad agencies and different ones now on my own and doing the resume writing business.
But you've been
So,
freelancing, right? You haven't gone back full time
right.
to the ad world.
I was
Right.
also teaching up until last fall.
Right.
So I had different sources of income.
Yeah, which well, I mean, yeah, that's in some parts they call it a portfolio career, right? But solopreneurship typically means you need to have a few things you have to juggle
Right,
until the one thing becomes 100%, which is
right,
what the aim is down the road. So,
right.
what would you say is your biggest fear about the future of your business, and what are you doing to sort of overcome it?
I think people will always need help with their writing, at
Yeah,
least while I'm alive. And I think that getting a different perspective that's not artificial intelligence is helpful. Um, I haven't been that very concerned about it, let's say.
so it's good to hear you're not worried about GPT becoming sentient anytime soon. Good.
I'm not really worried about it right now.
Okay. So tell me, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned about yourself on this journey?
Well, I guess what I will and won't put up with,
Right.
maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't really thought about that exactly, but I think I was watching your podcast
Yeah.
and over the past week or so, and I heard one woman say, you have certain clients and you realize you do not match up with them, and it's few and far between, but they're there. And I will just say, I don't think we're a match. It's hardly ever happened, but it's
Yeah.
happened a couple of times. Or they clearly decided that I was too expensive for them, even though I'm pretty low budget uh, compared to other resume writers. Um, and I try to help them when I'm able to help them and not just kind of adjust to everybody else's schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that.
And
Go ahead.
I also try to really tell them what I think about
Yeah.
what they're doing.
If we were to meet again 5 years from now, where would you want to be? What would you want to have achieved in your business? And
That's a good question. I like that question. I would like to help people all over the world, with and I would love to open up some kind of I don't know. I really enjoy working remotely, but I also like helping people one on one. I mean, I can do that remotely, but I like being in the presence of other people and helping them. And I guess it's from teaching. I would like to have some kind of farther reaching um, presence. So I might consider classes online
yeah,
to help people get their resume started, or um, and then they can work with me individually. Um, but I'd like to have it more of a global reach if possible.
yeah, and your passions in music, you're still harboring those, right? Yeah,
There's that too. I have a music background. My father was a professional musician,
right.
and I had 8 years of piano and viola and probably 15 years of voice lessons. And so that yeah, that's one of my greatest interests, music. And so I would love to work in the music industry somehow. But I am just concentrating on this part right now, and
Sure.
um, actually got a call from somebody in one of the big music companies. So he wanted, I had asked him if he could talk to me, and he did. I think he got back to me several months later, but he got back to me, so that was nice.
It's
It
good.
was
Yeah,
really nice and
yeah,
very helpful. So he said to keep in touch, so I will.
that's great. No, glad to hear that. And yeah, don't your passion's so important, right? And then maybe there's a
It
way to
is.
bring those worlds together too. And they
Yes,
sometimes complement each other too, right? They don't have to.
exactly.
Yeah. So
Yes.
if you could offer one piece of advice to somebody who wants to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
To start it,
Yeah.
I would say don't give up. I mean, if you have a difficulty in one place, there's an answer in another place somewhere. I mean, as I said, I was having a hard time getting a website. I got my website redone. I think it was in 2020, and the person didn't do a good job on it. And so I said, "Oh, I have to do this again." But then I remember looking at the website of my sister's friend, and I loved his website. And he told me who his designer was, and I got that designer, and it worked great. And I love my website now. So I mean, there just because something is difficult in the beginning doesn't mean there's not an answer. Just keep at it. Keep looking for the answer.
Persevere. And you never know
Yeah,
where to find it, right? To your point a
you
minute
never
ago,
know.
just like, yeah.
Right,
So
right.
is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
Um, I think that I would like to help as many people as I can. So please reach out to me.
Okay.
Um, that makes me feel good, and what's really important is it makes my client feel good when they are able to do something really important like get a job,
Yeah. No,
and I help
absolutely.
them do that. So
There's
that I think it's a win-win situation there.
Yeah, and it sounded like from what you described to me, there's definitely a therapeutic element, right? Which we all need. A little bit of a
Definitely.
boost of confidence,
Right.
and having a second set of eyes, right? That is very
Exactly.
valuable. Yeah.
Critical eyes.
Yes. Critical eyes, right? And grammatically correct eyes, which
Exactly.
is my wife's pet peeve about the world today. But maybe
Yes.
that's a separate podcast. So
Yeah, that's
that
right.
brings us to the rapid fire world. Um, and I'm going to just throw a couple of questions at you. Give us whatever comes to
Okay.
mind. If your resume writing process was a food dish, what would it be and why?
If it were a food dish, what
Yeah,
would it be and
your
why?
process. Yeah.
It would be the cuisine of Paris
Ooh,
because it's refined and It looks great.
That's no, but and a lot of knowledge and effort went into it, right? Because I think that's what I think of Parisian cuisine and
That's right.
expertise and expertise. I think it's a great
That's
answer.
right.
So,
Yeah.
what's the strangest job title you've ever had to work with on a resume?
I haven't had very many strange job titles. Maybe somebody was a magician, but it's not that that's so strange. I don't know. I can't remember that.
Okay. Um,
Sorry.
that's okay. There's no right or wrong. It's like, what's a
Okay.
small indulgence that always lifts your spirit during a tough day?
Chocolate ice cream.
That's a good one. What's a weird or surprising compliment a client has given you?
Hmm. I thought this was so funny. One of my clients, when I was working with him, I'd say, "Okay, if you did this, think about this when you're doing that." And I would give him all this advice, and he goes, "That is so smart." He'd say that about everything I was saying, and he was being sincere. And I said, "You are so nice." He goes, "It's my parents. They taught me to be polite."
That's funny. What's a guilty pleasure app or show you love but never admit to clients?
Oh, I love the Daily Show, but
Okay.
I would admit that to clients.
Yeah,
I
that's
also like Dateline.
okay.
And, was it 24 Hours? Is
Yeah,
it
I
24 Hours?
think so.
Yeah, I like the crime shows for some reason.
Okay. What's the first thing you look at when reviewing someone's resume?
The format
Yep.
and how many bullets there are for each job.
Okay. Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. And that's
That sticks out.
a great way to end our show. So, Hallie, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all your
Thank
wisdom. And
you.
I felt like we just did a master class on resume writing. So, thank you for that.
It was fun. Thank you very much.
Hallie's story is a reminder that solopreneurship isn't always bold pivots and brand reinventions. Sometimes it's quietly meeting people at their lowest and helping them see what they've actually done, what they're capable of, and what they can become. Here are my key takeaways. Clarity builds confidence. Hallie doesn't just rework resumes, she excavates buried value. Her clients often arrive overwhelmed and ashamed and leave surprised at how much they've accomplished. Solopreneurs, clarity sells. Whether you're pitching, partnering, or posting online, knowing how to express your value is a business advantage. Marketing that works isn't always paid. Despite investing in Google and Yelp ads, Hallie found her most consistent leads came from reviews and referrals. The marketing that mattered most, social proof. You don't need to spend a ton on ads. Testimonials and client results are the most valuable kind of currency to build trust and convert quietly. Expertise requires continuous learning. Despite years of experience, Hallie still attends seminars and engages with new tools. She's not fighting change, she's incorporating it while maintaining her core value proposition. The most successful solopreneurs don't just master their craft once, they remain perpetual students. Stay curious and don't be scared to evolve. Don't give up, find another way. When Hallie's website was hacked, her designer flaked, or tech threatened her business model, she didn't shut down. She found another solution. Persistence isn't just knocking on the same door, it's knowing when to look for windows. The path to success is rarely ever linear. AI can't replace empathy. Hallie isn't threatened by ChatGPT because it can't ask follow up questions, pull out buried strengths, or coach someone through tears. Your edge isn't efficiency, it's empathy. That's what clients remember, and that's what machines will never be able to replicate. Whether you're crafting someone else's professional story or trying to articulate your own unique value, Hallie's approach reminds us that the most powerful business proposition often comes from truly seeing people where they are and helping them get to where they want to go. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you got value from today's episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another solopreneur who needs this message. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind, and remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.